doesn't turn out like that for anyone. Maybe it does by chance, but the reality, the journey for everyone is unique. It's theirs. It's based on the experiences.
What are the secrets you may have picked up by osmosis?
With me growing up in this environment of traders where you don't really think a lot about risk, as long as your costs are covered, you just go and do it.
What got you here was a bit more calculated in terms of like aggressive goal setting, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't play out like that, sadly. That's the problem. I think we put a lot of weight on certain aspects of our life that don't deserve that kind of weight.
So when you read a biography of a famous entrepreneur, usually in the last chapter, they will say, don't do what I did because I didn't spend time with my family.
Yeah.
I didn't have my health. I have no hobbies,
Yeah.
but I built a great company.
Yeah.
And you're going to love my products. But don't do what I did because I paid a heavy price. In terms of inspiration, who had been some of your early mentors?
I've had more than 100 guides or mentors because
Really?
I was just never shy about asking.
Out of everything that you've done, what would you say is your favorite failure?
Where I had other partners and the partnerships didn't work out. I learned how not to do partnerships. The biggest mistake I made was try to be a product business and a services business at the same time. The problem is when you try to do both, your attention always go to the stuff that gives you money. That is what I found at least.
And you're half-assing both.
Exactly. Also, agencies, I found they were very self-absorbed. I didn't find joy in how self-centered the industry was. People would lose their brains over a misplaced comma. It's like someone died. I've had calls where someone threatened deportation to me from Australia at 2 a.m.
For a comma?
For like something that was not very serious. Effectively, the agency world is accountants extracting value out of creativity. Can I say something also in the early stages of agency? Something I didn't do, but I would like really recommend doing is take money out of the business.
Hello folks, welcome to My First Business. I'm Naeem Pervez and this podcast is for entrepreneurs, young or old, who are looking to improve the way that they look after their business. Each episode is designed to be like a conversation with a mentor that you never had, and you'll find inspiration, guiding principles, and possibly some solutions to your current business problems. We talk about the lows, like wanting to shut it all down, and we talk about the highs, like starting your second or your third or your fourth successful business, and also everything in between. My guest for this episode is Ruchir Punjabi. Ruchir is the founder and CEO of Distributed Energy, which helps investors invest in solar as an asset class and helps businesses save a ton of money by transitioning to solar. Before Distributed Energy, Ruchir had founded Langur, which was one of APAC region's largest independent digital agencies and was later sold to Havas Group in 2019. Langur started in Ruchir's living room in Sydney, Australia, and before he knew it, he'd grown it to a 200 plus people agency. They had offices in Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Melbourne, Bangalore, and Mumbai before the sale. Ruchir then sold his balance stake in Langur to a private equity group in 2022. Ruchir is also a computer science graduate from the Sydney University and a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. He's a fellow at the Asia Venture Philanthropy Network, and he's also a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization. He served on EO's Middle East and Pakistan Regional Council as well. I think you can tell that he's a very, very busy man. Alongside building million-dollar businesses out of thin air, Ruchir is extremely passionate about social change and thus has started a bunch of social impact organizations. After the international student crisis in Australia in 2010, Ruchir created the Australia-India Youth Dialogue, which was a diplomatic dialogue between the youth leaders of Australia and India. Ruchir is the founding chair of the School of Policy and Governance, which is a graduate school focused on executive education for the Global South from the Global South. Based on what I've told you about Ruchir right now, you can tell it would have been next to impossible to cover his entire journey in our conversation. However, I did get him to shower his wisdom on me on a very wide variety of topics. We talked about how he learned the art of business by osmosis. We spoke about how to choose the right partners for your business and why he doesn't go into business with his family. We talked about the secrets of building APAC region's largest digital agency and why he got out. We spoke about how he has matured when it comes to taking criticism and the work he has done to improve his self-awareness. He told me about his transition from someone who always had very strong expectations to becoming comfortable with going with the flow. We jammed about how to spot new opportunities in the market and how he bulldozes his way into a new opportunity. We talked about doing meaningful work that makes a difference and how that's become a focus of his entrepreneurial pursuits from here on. and much, 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 much more. Ruchir is the kind of guy that I want right beside me on an 18-hour flight. He's an absolute dreamer, he's a go-getter, and he's a go-giver as well. His humility in this conversation really touched my heart, and I think it'll do the same for you. So without much further ado, here's Ruchir Punjabi on the EO series of the My First Business podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Entrepreneurs Organization. Now, before I tell you what they do, first, let me tell you the numbers behind Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO for short. So they started in 1987. They've currently got 17,000 influential business owners as their members, spread across 213 chapters in 60 plus countries worldwide. They've been in the UAE since 1997 and have 119 members here, with a median member sales of roughly $4 million. And altogether, the total number of people employed by their members is over 23,000. And they've got members from all sorts of industries, including technology, healthcare, oil and gas, real estate, hospitality, jewelry, communications, logistics, travel. I could really go on. Mind blown yet? Now, here's what EO is actually all about. Here's what you get for being a member of EO, or here's what they do for you. EO in UAE provides an effective platform for networking, education, and support for business owners. The entrepreneurial journey can be lonely, and I can attest to that. And with an economy that changes on a dime, it can be hard to know what your next move should be. And that's where EO comes in with their support. One of the key benefits of membership is access to a robust calendar of events, including workshops, social events, and learning opportunities. So you get a ton of networking opportunities as well as a chance to learn from experts in your own field. EO also offers a mentorship program, so they pair you up with experienced business leaders who can offer guidance and support as you grow your own business. So for me, I've personally or vicariously benefited a lot from being in the EO network through their accelerator program, of which my partner is a part of. And if you're a business owner tired of taking on your challenges all alone and are looking for unique networking opportunities, along with structured support through accountability groups and mentors, well, you can either start a podcast like I did, or if you don't want to do that, I highly encourage you to apply to EO. I'll leave a link for you in the show notes. And if you're not fully convinced yet, I'll be bringing on business owners on this podcast that are currently members of EO, including today's guest, so you can get a sneak peek of what you're getting. Ruchir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let me get this out of the way before we get into the business stuff. You are not Punjabi. You are Gujarati.
No, I'm actually Punjabi from Gujarat.
So you're Gujarati and Punjabi.
Well, like culturally, I'm both.
You're both.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is, and for the audience members that don't know what Gujaratis are about, apart from their lovely food, I love theplas, they're known to be traders and business people in general.
Yeah,
Just a lot of hustle.
in the blood.
I remember going to a friend's Diwali party a few years ago, and just around, and pardon my religious ignorance, but around the part where they have the prayers, where the incense are on and the deities are there, I saw these ledgers, and I saw like these giant A4 bigger size ledgers, and they had numbers on them.
Yeah,
and it was right around where the prayers happened. Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm very familiar with that. It's called Chopra Pujan.
Okay,
which is you basically open your books for the year and you pray that the gods will be kind to your business. Effectively, I mean, I'm summarizing crudely, but that's what's happening.
I know. When I asked her, I'm like, "What is this about?" It blew my mind.
Yeah,
because we don't come from that same culture, right? Like having that prayer for prosperity,
right?
While submitting your books to God,
right?
Like
it's usually the day before Diwali, and it was a tradition in my family because my dad sold saris for a living.
Okay,
and you always went to the shop the day before Diwali in the morning. And the whole family gathered for that prayer.
I loved it.
It's something I grew up with.
I loved seeing that. And the reason I asked this is that I come from a culture, and maybe some of the people that are listening as well, that I wasn't raised around a lot of business people or traders and that kind of mentality. We were more the 9 to 5, get a job, you'll be fine. And, it works really well for a lot of people. Nothing against that at all. So I wanted to ask you, or maybe in your own words, what do you think there are some of the lessons that you know from being in that environment that people like me may not know. And in the sense that, what are the secrets you may have picked up by osmosis, by just being around? And, it could be about thinking big. It could be about risk taking. It could be about like relationship with money. But what I'm trying to do is steal that advantage for myself and for other people. Like you do all the learning and I'll get the bite size.
Yeah.
But as a first-time entrepreneur, what do I not know that you may have known by being around business people?
The one thing that comes to mind when you ask me that is when I went from university straight into business. I mean, I've been making a living out of, say, building websites since I was 15. And so when I was finishing university, I started my agency, digital agency, my last business, because I had enough contracts to pay for my office rent for 1 year. And there wasn't a lot of like design and conceptualizing on how this whole thing will play out. It was like, look, my rent has been paid. I might as well give this a shot. And why I share that story is because for a lot of people, that sounds really risky. But I think it had a lot to do with me growing up in this environment of traders where you don't really think a lot about risk. As long as your costs are covered, you just go and do it. So I think definitely the way I think about risk is quite different because of that upbringing. Because all you're thinking is, oh, what's the worst case scenario? Is that already covered? Okay, then it doesn't matter. Let's move forward.
Yeah. So risk in the sense that not overthink. And risk in the sense that, if you see an opportunity, like I feel like you're more open to seeing opportunities because you're in that mindset already, or you've seen people take advantage of opportunities.
You're always thinking about, oh, how are they making their 2 pennies? Like that's like just default because, again, you saw other people growing up always making the 2 cents. So you're constantly, like your mind is always attuned to that.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because that's one of the ththings that held us back for sure for Alina and myself. So Alina's father is a banker, lifelong banker, and he's very happy with the safe and secure life, which, he was blessed with. And around the time that we were planning to go out on our own, she was about 33, I was 34. So it's about 3 years ago now. And we were met with obstacles or let's say hesitations. Like, why are you doing this? You have a pretty good career. Like, why now? Which is like, it is a bit risky. Like, after being in the corporate career for like a good 10 years, like, why now? Like, you have a good thing going for you, pretty valuable in the job market. And we're like, no, you know what? Finally, I got into the risk-taking mode. I'm like, there's only one life. Let's try this out. But I like the fact that every time I have hung out with Kujus and Sindhis, they're always like, this is how he made his money. This is how she made his money. You know what that guy makes. you know how much. And they're very attuned, or you guys are very attuned to like how everyone is working in a very cooperative way too. Right. Which is the difference in some of the things, which is something I really admire. I wanted to ask you, so this is not from an EO perspective, but in terms of inspiration, who do you look up to outside of EO? Who had been some of your early mentors? Who were some of the people you were like, you know what, I admire what this person is doing, and I want to somewhat kind of model their life or in business? Who comes to mind for you?
I think I've never been a big fan of like one individual or 2 individuals because I think like all humans are imperfect, but there are certain ways some people approach a certain part of life which is quite attractive. And I find that I'm naturally curious, especially like in many ways what you're describing, starting out as a business at a young age. My sort of secret to reaching out to people was I was young, I could take rejection really easily. So I would just email people and say, I'd love to catch up for coffee with you. Can you give me some time? Especially if I had certain problems that I needed solving. I would just go and ask people who I thought had done it before.
What was an example of that when you were really young?
It might be like, especially early on, the biggest inexperience for anybody is hiring and building capacity, hiring people and looking after them, helping them grow. And I've been doing it for 15 years. I still struggle with it for sure. But early stage, like I have this particular friend who was a mentor for me, who was on my board of my last business. He'd built a 1,500 people company. So I would often go to him because he'd done it 1,500 times at least. So I knew that he would have some answers or some positive insight, and he would always be helpful. So there are people like that I would go to. I would say maybe I've had more than 100 guides or mentors, because
Really?
I was just never shy about asking. I would just go ask people. Part of the Gujarati thing where you're looking for ways to how they make money. I've never hesitated asking them that. I actually just ask them.
So is it always when you're stuck on an issue or a problem that you go and reach out, or are you proactively also reaching out?
It used to be a lot more proactive now. I think in some ways you start building stories as you go older. But I was very proactive before. Now it's more, I sort of know the specialists in case something I've been stuck on for a while. I'll just go out to the people I know where they might help me solve it.
Yeah. And is it happening the other way around? Are people now reaching out to you and
I
asking
think,
for guidance?
that happens quite often too. And there is this, somebody introduced me to this book, happened chance, called Go Giver. I don't know if you've read it. It's worth reading. Effectively,
Go-giver
the
versus go-getter. Okay.
Yeah, the philosophy, the simple philosophy is that you give and you give and you give, and something will come for sure.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I've always been like that in my life. So I haven't ever thought about not giving. But when someone introduced me to that book, I was like, oh, this is describing who I am. So it's quite nice to then read that. But basically, yeah, if someone asks for help, be ready to offer it. I think you never know how it comes back.
Well, that's what's going to happen for the next 1 hour. This is my way of calling out to people
Sure.
and getting their help with some of the things that are on my mind, because everything that I'm asking you about is literally something that I'm going through right now on a journey. As you know, like the entrepreneurship cycle is not linear in any shape, way, or form, and the amount of things in consideration are exponentially large than when you are in a job as well. So I'll be going a lot of different places. I want to talk about your LinkedIn for a second. So I go to your profile, I do my research, and it shows me like your recent companies. And then under that, it says show all 28 experiences. And I'm like, how old is this guy? So my question to you is, do you sleep at all? And secondly, out of everything that you've done, what would you say is your favorite failure? And by favorite failure, I would mean that something that didn't accomplish its goal fully, but you learned a ton out of it, or you made some great relationships because of it. And you probably do it again, knowing that it will fail. Because as I said, like it's not a linear path.
Yeah.
From those 28, if all of those are home runs, then I'm leaving this interview here right now.
I don't think anybody has as many home runs. No. The truth is, I haven't counted the 28, and I'm being honest. I put them on because it starts, and usually I want some visibility for it. So I use LinkedIn as a promotion tool for the business. So I haven't screened them very much. The few ones that have failed, I think, where I've gained the most is especially ones where I had other partners and the partnerships didn't work out. And there were different ways we tried to structure things. And I learned how not to do partnerships. So for example, there are a couple of businesses in there where effectively we took equity in that business for sweat as opposed to putting cash in them. And you had certain expectations with a partner, etc. But in some of those instances, at least one I can think of, there was a gap between what the partner expected as sweat versus what we gave. And what we thought we were doing was very valuable, but they did not value it. And so some of that friction made me realize anytime you go into a new business, you are either full-time or you put cash. If you do sweat, do less than 1%. Because there's no other method which is clean and easy without any drama. So that's like a core lesson now. So anytime someone wants me to be an advisor, I will often take a very small amount of equity, or I will angel invest so that they don't care whether I play a important role or not, because they at least have the cash in the business. So then my role is never questioned. So that's a meaningful learning from some of those.
Was that pretty early on that you figured that out, or was that?
I suppose in maybe the last 6 or so years. So like midway through my professional life, basically.
Yeah, it's a good turning point. I did want to talk about partnerships separately, but let's get into it now. Let's see. So what you bring up is very important to me, at least right now. So right now I work with my wife as a partner, which is nice in a lot of ways because we eat from the same plate. Like the income comes to our home and we eat from the same plate. It's a lot easier. I imagine at some point I'll be doing business with people that, they have their own families to feed and I have my own families to feed. And I see that going in like two different directions. So the incentives kind of change personally for people too. And we're all human. Even if we're not evil, we're just human at the end of the day, right? So after learning that lesson, apart from that, deciding on quantifiable measures of what makes a partner in the business, what are some other heuristics? What makes how can you tell, especially if you're meeting someone new, or how long do you need to know them for?
Yeah.
And when you meet someone new, how can you kind of assess, like, at some point I may partner with them? Do you have any heuristics?
Values alignment is quite important, and it's such a soft point because you don't know how to measure that. But often when decision making starts happening, so when you start thinking about, say, fundraising or what the business model should be or the kind of people you hire, if you start zooming in on either complementary skills or you start zooming in on like pure values alignment, like you can tell that person is experienced, their logic is really solid, then you start feeling really good about working with that person. Between my last main business to my current main business, I had that journey where I was talking to many people about deciding what next. And one of those, like I had 3 options. And the option I chose, which is distribute energy now, part of that was because of the values alignment with the partners I had. Like I felt we have a lot of respect for each other. We know what this business will take. It's a real long slog. It requires a long-term view. And we had extremely complementary skills. So that made sense. But even then, despite knowing all that, we agreed on vesting schedules for the equity. Because it is possible people may leave, people may change their mind about the business, or you just are not happy with working with each other. I'm more careful about it now. I think partnerships are invaluable in business. As you're learning, like the other skills, the ability to just bounce things off is super, super helpful.
Yeah.
But you want to go along on a journey where you trust and respect the person next to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a important problem to go through because 2 + 2 is 5 when we do a partnership right. Or at least in my case, when I talk to Alina, I joke about it. Like there's some times where Alina and I, 1 + 1 is 3. There's some times when 1 + 1 is 1 because we get into groupthink. We're thinking the same wrong idea, for example. And sometimes 1 + 1 is 2. So we're always aiming for the 1 + 1 is 3. Is like, how can the combined energy of your marketing background, my sales background, how can that be like the best thing that our clients can utilize us for? And but I've had a lot of time to study her. I've had a lot of time. We've married for 8 years, so like I know her inside out, and she knows me inside out as well. And then I talk to other entrepreneurs that have been on the show. Some have partnered with their childhood buddy, their chuddy buddies. Some have partnered with families, with brothers. Like Rishi was here, and him and his brother and him and his dad have worked together a long time. And I haven't yet or talked to the other one of my best friends. He's partnering with his cousin, for example. Are your current partners like not family, right?
I avoid it actually.
You avoid family.
I avoid family.
Tell me more.
Mainly from like other people's experience. The same thing you're doing now. I've actually heard other people talk about working with family and the trickiness of like negotiating quite simple things. So I go out of my way to avoid it. Like, I use their help sometimes. My dad is an incredible, helpful person who like go out of his way to do things for me. But even then, like when like he's not involved in my businesses, I've never been involved in his businesses. We'll bounce things off each other, but I think I don't want the tension to be at home. So I sort of avoid it, mainly from the experience shares and the stories I've heard of others. What is your experience like?
It's mixed. It is mixed. I can see it working for certain individuals. The thing is, what you have to do is separate, or this is just my experience, and I'm not the smartest person in this room at least, is that if you start formalizing the business and you take the relationship and the emotion out of it with not just the values, but also procedures, processes, goals, and regular check-ins on KPIs, and you make the business about the KPIs more than anything else, then it can work. On the other side, what I'm more worried about, I'm not worried about disagreement as much as I'm worried about agreement on the wrong plan, which is my biggest problem with family business. It's like when you're so close to each other that one person says a bad idea, and Alina and I have both been guilty of this. I'll say something like stupid, hey, for the next 6 months we're doing this. Yeah, it's really good. And we sell it to each other. We're like, yeah, we're on board. 6 months later, we're like, we shouldn't have done that. And then we do that. So I'm more worried because you don't want to, because you're so close from like a heart perspective that you kind of get the buy-in. So that's
I also think both the people need maturity for like respecting each other's views, having the space, because obviously things are going to go wrong. Obviously there are going to be times when you're upset at each other, but being able to take a step back and have that open conversation is hard work. My wife is a vet, and there is a business I always think about which is vet related.
Okay.
And I haven't done it because
pet insurance. I'm
yes, exactly, but not here. And
you should do pet insurance for lions. Apparently, a lot of people are buying lions here,
especially in the States, I imagine. But no. Anyway, so it's I'm not that excited, partly because I worry about my personal relationship. So I'll come to you when that happens.
Well, Alina's probably the only person in my family, and I'm sorry, family, that I would do business with in that sense, right? Sorry, mom. Sorry, dad. Like I'll do real estate deals with my parents and stuff like that, like do real estate investments, but I will not do like business. And the other reason is also, can you do an MVP of what your relationship would be like? So Alina and I have tried a few different MVPs of what if we were to do something together while we both had jobs. So we did a few side hustles that went to zero and to negative, like before they even got off the ground. And I just enjoyed the process of working with her. She enjoyed it. It gave us a lot of energy.
Right.
And I was telling you before we started, the reason we got into business together, or expanding on that story, is when COVID came and the contracts were drying up in my previous company. Alina was a freelancer at the time. So she was doing performance marketing for local companies here.
Right.
And, one thing led to the other. She had more clients than to know what to do with, all by herself. My salary was being cut because of COVID and like business constraints. Yeah. We were sitting on the couch one day. It was like, hey, we always wanted to do something together. Right. And it was very romantic in that way, business romantic, not like couple romantic. And she said, we've always wanted to do something together. This is the perfect thing for us. You're a good sales guy. You understand like the whole copywriting thing, and I'm a marketer, and like we do this together. Yeah. And it was a decision made on the couch. Yeah. I don't think I can do that with others, but I do know in the future, I do want to put eggs in different baskets because we're also taking a risk. So the other thing with family business, if you only do a family business, then all eggs are in one basket. Which is why I'm trying to take this podcast and see what comes out of it. So this would be my independent thing. And then spin-off, while this spins off, and if it does something, then she gets her own spin-off. And I don't know, I'm on the look for partners. So if you guys listening who haven't called me for 3 years and call yourself my friends, please give me a call because I'm looking for you. Let me talk a bit more about partners. So what kind of habits and routines do you guys get into together? Like in terms of your regular meetings, is there a structure? Do you do offsite things? Like logistically, how does that partnership look? Yeah. Are you in the same place all the time or?
No, and especially in distributed energy, that's not the case. To be honest, actually, I don't think I've been in the same city as my partners ever. But and as a result, communication becomes everything. Obviously, your WhatsApp channel or whatever Slack channel you want to keep, that's invaluable. I do, in our business, we have monthly cadence around leadership, around co-founder calls. And in that monthly meeting, we have a set agenda, a set review of priorities. Being the CEO, I bring all the burning issues for me. And then if there's anything else, the other partners bring it up. And then usually between meetings, we have the chat or we have the one-on-ones. I'm talking to the other 3 partners at least 2 times a week, if not more.
Okay.
Because in many ways, as a CEO, I'm the glue that brings the whole thing together. And then we have leadership meetings in which 2 of the 3 partners are in my leadership group. So then that's a weekly call. And there is the most like tactical stuff that maps against our priorities. So now we're talking about more details in terms of what's going on. Even then you miss a few things sometimes. So it's not like perfect. But cadence is important because then stuff gets done and everybody's on the same page. I think a big problem in partnerships especially is the unsaid things roll and become big things.
Yeah.
So like having this discipline is really important so that like there's not much unsaid stuff. There is, but as little as possible.
Yeah. I'm trying to relate to that because if I were to not share a bedroom with my partner, there could be a lot of unsaid stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But Alina and I literally have one car and we're in the same bedroom. So there's no unsaid stuff. It all comes out.
Right.
So how do you in your meeting, is it very structured in terms of meeting minutes? And do you have do you have a way of poking to find out if it sounds like it's an important thing to look after the unsaid stuff? Do you have a way to poke around?
I'm very direct. So I usually just go straight to the meat because if something's bothering me, like my sort of view is take it head on so it's out of the way. Otherwise it'll linger and then it disrupts everything else. Yeah. So, and it's actually something I should work on because I could be kinder and nicer about it. So it's actually not necessarily always a positive because then you assume things and the assumptions are actually quite wrong relative to where the other person's coming from. Yeah. So, but whenever it's negative, it's usually one-on-one. Yeah. And otherwise the business tactical stuff is business tactical stuff. Yeah. One thing I'll say also is I've over time become much better at listening to criticism. And that's taken a lot of work. And now instead of being defensive, I try. Again, it's a muscle. It requires practice. It doesn't happen every day.
Tell me about it.
Try to separate the emotion from the substance of what somebody's saying. And then does that substance actually make sense? Oh yeah, it does. Okay, no, I really need to make it work. And so that's been a wonderful part of this journey the second time, where I'm a lot more, just where do we go from here? Is it the right direction as objective as opposed to my feelings coming in the way?
Yeah, it's like you start off from one extreme, which is very direct and blunt. And then the other extreme is bad too, which is where you're too empathetic. Right. And you're too caring. Right. And you let everything slide. Right. And that doesn't work either.
That doesn't work either. Yeah.
Have you ever been that guy?
No. No, if I have a problem with you, either you never hear from me or you definitely hear the next call I have with you for sure. I think but I find, and I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing, but I find you deal with the problem right away.
Of course.
You don't let it linger. It's hopefully objective. If the other person takes it in the right spirit, you also hopefully bring in your values into that conversation. Yeah. Then people, if they see it in a positive light, then you can move forward. And that applies the other way. Like if someone's giving me a view, I need to be there listening as opposed to reacting.
Yeah. Well, when you get some more headway through this defensiveness and taking criticism, please share more notes. I have a very recent example from 12 hours ago, actually, of driving back with Alina, and she had a very valid criticism. Yeah. Turned me off completely. I shut off.
Shut down, yeah.
We drove for about 20 minutes. I was silent. She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Give me time. Give me time." I got home. She's like, "I'm sorry I brought that." I'm like, "No, your criticism was valid. Yeah. Just timing. Let me deal with it. Give me the time." Yeah. I'm like, I find no holes in what you said. Yeah. Everything you said checks out. It's true what you said about me. I'm just not ready to deal with it internally.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm like, let me sleep, wake up.
It's very mature, yeah.
We'll be friends.
But I think
this happened, honestly, it happened the first time last night. I'm more like you in that sense where I am quick to aggression.
Yeah.
More than I should be. I'm confrontational when I do feel something, and I try to poke a lot. Like, tell me or prove me wrong. Like, if I'm feeling this way, it's now the onus is upon you to prove me wrong.
Right.
Which again is also like, it's a bit too much, I think. So I need to.
I would say
do
one
the
thing
work too.
I've been like, this is not original. Someone said this to me. It's like a big part of it is just listening to your feelings and figuring out what is the actual feeling you want to feel. And why that bridge is important is because we get stuck in the substance, the outcome. And when you get stuck there, then it's all about your brain doing all the fighting.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you actually ignore the substance and just be like, oh, why did that make me feel that way? I want to feel happy. What is the path to actually feeling calm or like aware or whatever? Then the bridge there is quite different from arguing. So that's the truth is what ends up happening is 1 in 2 1 in 2 instances I immediately get it, and the other one it takes me maybe yesterday in one item it took me about 20 minutes to get it. So
Just breathe.
yeah,
Take some water.
yeah, exactly.
No substance. No substance.
No, exactly. Like just focus on how do I want to feel calm. Okay, why did that make me? Oh, it's like it was not relevant. It shouldn't have bothered me. Here is a way I should react to it.
You know what I've realized, and I don't know if this holds true for you, but when I get defensive, if I peel the onion, it's because of an insecurity that I have.
Right.
So that the
Exactly,
thing that happened last night,
Yeah.
what the reason it triggered me is because I had that insecurity about myself. And I didn't know that until 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
The first 20 minutes were hell.
Right.
I was having such a good time. What did you ruin my mood? Like, had a great night. I went out with friends and everything. And now I'm like all lumpy. But is that true for you too? Like, do you find your insecurities a bit more through your defensiveness?
I'm just thinking, there's not many places I'm insecure. I think it's like all these core beliefs that get in the way. And part of it is undoing some of those core beliefs, It might be things like, so I guess partly it's an insecurity in that, like a fear of failure, or some of it may be to do with like wanting more control and things like that. So it's not always an insecurity. Sometimes it's a belief. And it's doing all of them. It's just like learning how to objectively listen to something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Some of these are the values that you hold for yourself or the standards that you hold for yourself.
Sure.
And if they're under attack, then
and sometimes
they're
they're serving you negatively. So realizing that is the hard part.
Yeah. Did you ever let your fear of failure or your thirst for success put you on a path to kind of burning out or turning your life into
I think it affected me in a different way. And I've again, like now you ask me what my superpower is, I would say it's self-awareness, which like 7 years ago, that was not true at all by any means. And why I say that is because I was in this loop of wanting to leave a legacy. And that used to mean a lot to me. And I had a certain path to wanting to do that. Yeah. But now, like where I've landed is I just want joy in the work I do. And so much of the actions I take is finding the joy in the work, not in anything else. So, but like I said, it's been a journey to get there. It's not been overnight, and it still requires work, every day.
What was the switching point? What was the pivot for going from I want to build my legacy, people 100 years are going to know about me, to thinking about today and what brings you joy? I
think it's been incremental, so it's not been like the one moment that did it. But I think the thing, I was fortunate enough where I did a ton of glamorous stuff when I was 20, 21, did a lot of media, I was in student politics. Like some of the stories I could tell you, like I've had lunches with like Prince William, like massive range of things. And what I learned from that experience is I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, but it wasn't that outcome wasn't necessarily that exciting as the work that I was doing, which was. And what I've discovered over time is putting a lot of onus on these goals. Some people have like big numbers they want to, like big money they want to make. Some people have like want to change the world in a certain way. What I realize is those goalposts will always keep moving. If you've heard of Sisyphus and the story of pushing the boulder up, there's this good podcast that I'll share with you. But basically, this guy's been cursed, and he has to push the boulder up every day. And every time he reaches to the top, the boulder comes down. So a natural philosopher's question is, why don't you just commit suicide? Because like, what's the point of just pushing the boulder up and down every day? And one of the responses, which is the one I've sort of tried to take up, is this idea that you can be happy while you push the boulder up. So that's at least what I'm trying to do at the moment, because in many ways we're a 10,000-year-old species. We are completely insignificant. We'll be forgotten long before. Anyway, so in that context,
tiny monkeys.
It doesn't matter.
It's floating around.
Exactly, it's irrelevant. And so in that context, the only thing that matters is, am I happy? And doing things that make me happy. So that's what I'm trying to do more of.
I love that, man. I love that you're able to speak about it comfortably too. I don't think if we sat down maybe 7 years ago,
no way.
We'd have a very different. We think about the 2 pennies we have to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do we?
That's right.
Where do we get the next 2 pennies?
That's right. Yeah.
No, the stuff you're talking about is super important to us at least. I'll give you a background. One thing I haven't told you in detail is that we've done. We were inspired by guys like Tim Ferriss, for example, from the 4-Hour Workweek fame, to build a lifestyle business. So right from the start, our genesis of starting the business was, this is a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
So unlike Langur, we never wanted a 200-person agency, and we still don't.
Right.
We don't want a Media City office because, I mean, there is space for that. Nothing against
that space, yeah.
That space. It's what our values were, and like, because we worked for so long and you jumped into business right after college, we had all this time to kind of figure out like, okay, what are our values? And we were quite, I'd say, stable, mature by the time we got into business. So we constantly fight. We're talking about setting goals and setting the right goals, right? We constantly fight between being super aggressive with our wealth goals, but also super aggressive with our, joy goals, or, having, I'll tell you one of my goals. One of my goals is so superficial and inquantifiable. I want to live an interesting life. How do you measure that? I don't know. But I need to know that I did something interesting today. You sitting across from you today, this is the most interesting that I'll do today.
Sure.
And because of this, I'll get opportunities to do interesting things. Will I make money doing this? No, but then how will I feed my future kids? So like, you have to keep fighting between these two things. So I wanted to ask you about that actually, because again, when I was looking you and your 28 experiences up, one of the parts I admired is that it looks like an interesting life, right? Like, you are not tied down to one thing. You are you're happy to experiment, it seems like, and you will confirm that in a second. And I said, you know what, to myself, this is what my LinkedIn also needs to look like. In fact, it already is kind of taking that shape. So I was doing this coding program I was telling you about, and I met a friend there at Astrolabs, and he's working at Visa at the time. He's like, hey, Naeem, I looked at your LinkedIn, man. He's like, it's messy. I'm like, why? He's like, there's no one thing you do. You do so many things. Why can't you stick to one thing? He's like, you're confusing employers. I'm like, you know what? I actually take that as a compliment, because to me, that looks like interesting. So let me ask you a few questions about, having that multiple personality syndrome. Has that always been your goal, to kind of have your hands and feet in different things, or?
Yeah, see, the thing that people don't notice is the underlying themes. So it's not, they're not that different, like all the things I've done.
Maybe you can start telling us by what you're actively involved in today.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
we'll build up on
we go backwards, sure. No, so I have, right now I spend most of my time on 2 things. One of them is distributed energy. So we finance renewable energy in emerging markets. Renewable energy has an equity problem. It's very expensive upfront for small and medium businesses to afford. An average business will cost them $100,000 to put solar on the rooftop, and would you rather have that tied in energy, or would you want to invest in a machine or something else? So we make renewable energy affordable by spreading the cost over 7 to 20 years. And we have plants in India, UAE, in Rwanda, in Botswana, in Burkina Faso. So basically focus on markets where the transition is difficult. And the other thing I work on is this not-for-profit called School of Policy and Governance. We basically, one of the main things we do there is focus on training Indian politicians about climate change. But we run a range of programs around public policy, climate change, around basically equipping leaders in the global south to lead better. So they're the two main things. There's lots of like angel deals, some board roles, some investments, but the two things that I spend most time on.
And when you're spending time with these, and we're talking about you trying to tie interesting things and a bunch of different things, how do you currently, at least, and how has this changed over time, structure your time then? Like macro and micro. So micro meaning day, week, month, macro meaning longer. Are you on flights all the time? Do you live on a calendar? Do you have a to-do list? How do you manage all these different...
All of the above. I mean, I don't think
You have a VA that helps you? What's going on?
Like I have two very helpful assistants in both the organizations who help me keep those lives together, respective lives together. I do spend time on the ground a lot. So it means that I spend 10 to 15 days in Dubai every month. I'm usually in India at least once a month, and usually in an African country or elsewhere once a month. So that's sort of the average travel. And then lots of to-do lists, emails, meetings. Like I find I organize myself in a weekly cadence, and I have like set calls that do certain things. And I enjoy that because it helps me zoom in regularly without forgetting about something, which is my biggest fear. It's like, hey, we agreed on doing this last week and I don't follow up. So making sure that certain things are set every week at least allows me to follow up.
And how often do you macro plan? Like the 90 days, 180 days?
Yeah. It's organization dependent. Like I said, because personally I've moved away from this idea of legacy. Like I actually had a presentation about where my life should go.
What did you give it to?
I mainly presented it to my peer group in EO actually.
Okay.
But I haven't opened it for the last 2 or 3 years.
Tell me about
it. And
that's
I actually think I shouldn't, because it's a positive in many ways, because I'm going with the flow a lot more now than I would have otherwise. Like I was so attached to the idea of where things should go as opposed to accepting things as they come. And I think there's a lot more joy in accepting things as they come. So I do have plans that are specific to organizations.
Yeah.
But overall, am I happy waking up every day? That's the answer. Yeah.
So how do you reconcile? Because this sounds really good, right? Like in theory, it sounds really good. I'm gonna follow the flow.
Yeah.
And you still have mouths to feed. Like, okay, let's talk about it this way. What got you here? Was a bit more calculated, I'm guessing, like in terms of like aggressive goal setting. This is the money. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't play out like that. Sadly, that's the problem. I think there are. Let's say you set an outcome that you want to achieve. You either achieve it or you don't.
Like a monetary outcome.
Let's say monetary outcomes, that your business needs to be X size, right? X revenue, Y income or whatever.
Yeah.
You reach it or you don't, and both those outcomes often have a negative reaction. Like you reach it and you're like, oh, should I have done more? You don't reach it. It's like, why didn't I do it? And so it's not like. What I've learned over time is setting goals doesn't always give you the feelings that you want. So I think it's helpful to drive people towards a united goal, but it's not necessary that for you personally you have like a big number or any of that. It's sort of now I'm a lot more open to new, like going with the flow than I used to be. And I was like, because the outcomes didn't necessarily always turn out the way I wanted.
And the other thing is, no matter, there's this quote, right? Man plans and God laughs.
Right.
Because you can plan whatever you want. So if I were to, for example, in the height of my super or uber planning kind of mentality, or even I do this to Alina sometimes, I'm like, Alina, if I asked you 5 years ago, where would you be 5 years from now? Would your answer match where you are today?
Yeah.
And it's for most people, it's wrong. If I asked you 5 years ago, Ruchir, where do you see yourself 5 years
I
from
was
now?
walking in Burkina Faso 2 months ago, checking out customer roofs. And I was like with my West Africa partner then. And I was like, you asked me this in high school that I'd been Burkina Faso checking out solar rooftop for solar. Like I just have no idea how could I even have got there?
Yeah.
So of course, exactly. And I think why fight when you can accept?
Yeah.
So accept.
I think it ties into your risk taking too, right? So
Sure.
going with the flow is a bit
Sure.
riskier way, but I think the other way is also risky because you're just telling yourself lies when you're setting these goals.
I think so. I think we put a lot of weight on certain aspects of our life that don't deserve that kind of weight.
Yeah.
And I think if you just take a step back, I think one of the things, again, it's so easy to talk than to walk, but like the one thing I do think about is lowering expectations. I actually think Elon Musk is really good at it. Like every time you hear him talk, he'll talk about, I think this rocket launch will fail.
Yeah.
I think
even with Tesla, it's like, please don't invest. Like
exactly.
this is
I don't
not
know
a
if it'll
safe
work
investment.
out. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that is a really good way to build mental models.
Yeah.
To be realistic about your chances.
Yeah.
Because then when you have low expectations and you actually exceed them,
Yeah.
you actually are happy about the progress you're making. When you set really high expectations and you don't achieve them, then you go into depression. The reality is that was all in your mind either ways.
Yeah.
It was like it doesn't change the outcome. The outcome was the outcome no matter what.
Yeah.
So I think accepting things as they come, lowering expectations. I mean, these are muscles I'm trying to build for myself and working on.
Also, what do you think about sometimes the price you have to pay to get to your goals can be a bit too steep that you didn't realize? And this could be hearing from entrepreneurs. So when you read a biography of like a famous entrepreneur or a founder or something like that, usually in the last chapter, they will say like, my life was a cautionary tale. Don't do what I did because I didn't spend time with my family.
Yeah.
I didn't have my health. I have no hobbies,
Yeah.
but I built a great fucking company.
Yeah.
And you're going to love my products, but don't do what I did because I paid a heavy price.
But I also think everybody's story is their own. So sometimes we want to glorify and see things through a certain lens in a way that fits our own experience of it, right? But it's what that person wanted in that time, right? And that's what they went with. So all these, I mean, especially this business guidance porn, which I like try and avoid it as much as possible because everyone has this real snippet that sort of solves everything in your life and you're going to now win.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't turn out like that for anyone, maybe it does by chance, but the reality, the journey for everyone is unique. It's theirs. It's based on the experiences. You today asked me, the first question you asked me about how I feel as a Gujarati and a Punjabi. And to me, that is obviously my experience. It's so unique to me, the way I think about risk. So many people will never think about risk that way. So even if you try to emulate my model, it may not work. So I think, exactly, again, be selfish and figure out what drives happiness for you and like seek it. I think I will say this: financial security does make a difference, and like having sold a business, etc. Like my mental framing is quite in that zone. That makes a big difference for sure. So let me not discount that because you've hinted on that a couple of times. But I have the freedom to do the things I want that bring me joy. So I try and do that as opposed to build more wealth or build whatever the next like fancy car or whatever.
I don't think that's a qualifier though. Like it's good to have that financial security, but it's not a qualifier to live a joyful or an interesting life with your work. With whatever craft you choose to be, right? Like you could be a broke dead artist, but you have the joy of being an artist.
Right.
for
Exactly.
example, right? Like,
Exactly.
it's the life you chose.
Exactly.
And for you, that's the life. Do
Exactly.
you wake up every day liking to be an artist, even though that you're broke?
Right.
You don't get into galleries. You don't good at networking, but you choose to do the art. You take odd jobs here and there, but you accept, as you said earlier, you accept that.
Yeah, exactly.
And you
I
do
don't
that.
know if Banksy makes money out of the murals he makes, but like he or she should, like, let's be clear, like, is politically motivated enough to go out and make certain statements regularly. And I'm sure they have a lot of joy if they still keep doing it after all these years. So exactly, that's a fair
He
point.
probably has a whole team now.
You
know, or
You
she
would not know. Yeah, exactly.
You would not
Yeah,
know. He's outsourced. He has a franchise model, or she has a franchise model. Buy into the Banksy brand, pay royalties to me. Okay, so these opportunities, so like the SPG and distributed energy and all the 15 other things that you do, Ruchir. Do they come to you or do you go to them? Like, how does it usually happen?
Most times it's like me chasing things I want to do because like something doesn't make sense and I want to address that. I think over a period of time I've become a better filter. I think before I wanted to do everything. But now it's like, okay, like I don't think that will work, or it needs a lot of work, or it needs a lot more of my time. So I'm not in that position right now. Like I briefly mentioned pet insurance. Like I just not in the right place to do it at the moment or whatever. So now I have more filters, but usually I chase them. But some of it involves saying yes and being open-minded when people talk to you about things. So especially when I was exiting Langur, I had all of these. I made the choice to just have conversation with a lot of people about all these different opportunities. And I think at one point I had maybe 16 or 17 things that I could have considered. But I just thought about the things that stayed in my mind that I was like, yeah, that really excited me. And I kept thinking about how to tackle that problem and so on. So it narrowed down to 3 things that I really thought were interesting and I really wanted to do them. And in some ways, like self-selection or talking to the respective people made distributed energy to sort of the natural fit.
What were the other 2 that didn't make the cut?
One was running an incubator for a very well-established brand in India. And the other was a startup in sort of validating people's background around their work. And so making sure that they did what they say they did. But doing it in a way that sort of was a lot more friendlier. Like reference checks, basically.
Sounds
but in
like 1984.
Yeah, no, but, because especially in India, like every job you get 800 applications. How do you actually verify who's really good or who's not? So that was the third option. So anyway, but this was by far the most sort of game-changing in terms of adding value in the world. So that's why eventually I ended up here.
That's crazy because at this stage of my life at least, that's a big idea, man. Like working on distributed energy, that's not a small problem to solve. It's solving a very complex and a very large problem. And not to like say this about your previous industry and my current industry, but it's not rocket science. Like the marketing agency stuff is not rocket science. Like there are no secrets to running a good agency. I feel like it's all the basic stuff. Do the basic stuff right. And don't be lazy with it.
Exactly.
And like that's.
No, I think also agencies, I found they were very self-absorbed. I think the one thing, part of the design of leaving it, there were 2-3 reasons, but one of them was I didn't find joy in how self-centered the industry was. And like people would lose their brains over a misplaced comma. It's like you would often realize how insignificant, because you're helping other people to make money. And part of that experience is like some people will make mistakes, but like it's like someone died and you'll be like, I've had calls where someone threatened deportation to me from Australia at 2 a.m.
For a comma?
For like something that was not very serious. And I think to myself, like, anyway, so but here, at least, even if I had that, which I don't, but even if I had that, at least I know I'm adding value. I think the thing I struggle with agencies is what was the impact on the world? And for me, again, part of the process of finding joy is doing things that add value. And here, in renewable energy specifically, the big problem is there is a lot of capital for big solar plants because the capital trusts governments to pay. There is some capital for residential systems because it's an asset on top of a house, and if you live in that house, people trust you to make a payment. But there's this missing middle of small and medium businesses, which people don't know how to evaluate, especially in our parts of the world. So the thing is, if we really want to do something about climate change, affect the problem of reducing how high the temperature changes will go and so on, and reduce emissions, we have to transition a big chunk of this segment to renewable energy. So finding capital to help these businesses transition, but also save money through that transition, because actually over time renewable energy is much cheaper, is an incredible problem to solve. And now we're basically the bridge of capital to this category because we've innovated ways to figure out who to trust. That somebody will pay money. And
so wait, who's your end customer then? Is it the SME?
Yeah. Sometimes it is installers, but usually it's the SME.
And these SMEs, for an example, would be like a car garage or
a car dealership.
Something.
I have 3 car dealerships
Anyone
in
with
Kerala.
a big roof.
Usually, exactly, and somebody where the electricity bill is really high.
Okay. So you foot the bill for the installation,
Right?
And then you
Spread
gain
that
it
cost.
back.
Yeah. So they're either
cost for them.
they're either paying us for power,
Okay.
if the regulation allows us to sell power to them,
Yeah.
or they're paying us a lease for that equipment. But usually the savings are very clear.
And how do you get that mindset into, like, let's say, Indian SMEs?
Right.
Are they thinking about this stuff? Do they care? Or is it pure, you will save money over long-term
I would say
messaging?
70-80% of it is about the financial benefit that comes from it. So for most people, it is like, oh, how much do I save? 10 or 20% care about either they care about the world or they care about the marketing opportunity that comes with it, which is around telling their customers, hey, we are a green business now, or we have clean energy as a power source. So they are the various incentives.
Okay.
And then why do they work with us? Because traditional banking in these parts of the world does not fund this equipment, or they have very short-term loans, or they want extra collateral.
Yeah.
So they make it very difficult for these businesses to borrow against solar as an asset class.
So you're feeling that space left open by the banks.
Basically. And at some point, like World Bank has put in a ton of money to the State Bank of India, but the State Bank of India has really struggled to deploy that money, as an example. So there are global efforts to try and help these countries and businesses transition, but it's not reaching the end.
The money doesn't reach
Right.
the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fed Reserve is like, tap is on, but like it doesn't get to the people.
Well,
at the
and
end.
that's a whole other problem. The
Yeah.
cost of capital is too high now, yeah.
It's getting higher and higher. I mean, we were spoiled for a long time. Come on. It was artificially spoiled.
To be honest,
for a long
what's
time.
interesting actually, and this is counterintuitive and it's a tangent, but
It's fine. I love tangents.
it's them raising their interest rates has been favorable to us because there was all this cheap money in the market that was ruining the market for the rest of us. Yeah. Because you would hear in the news that the Indian government will buy power at 3 rupees per unit because the cost of capital was so low. But now my SME customer is like, hey, they're getting 3 rupees. Why can't I get 3 rupees? And obviously there's a big credit underwriting difference in SME versus the government, for sure. But that would skew the conversation. So the interest rates going high now, like no one's having that conversation anymore. They're like comparing us to their banks instead of listening to these headlines.
It's perfect. Yeah. But also on the other side, I hope the flow of money does get smaller, because I think we've burned through way more businesses in the last 10 years than we ever have in history, because everyone was getting, any project would get funding, right?
Right.
I hope, what I do hope for is more careful entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
It's like just put money that, you will not be able to
You
pay
keep
back.
getting bubbles. Like that company yesterday that got $100 and something million for AI in France. $110 million, 1 month old company, $105 million, some absurd number.
And they're gone
in
now?
1 month. Yeah. No, they just raised that money in 1 month. So bubbles will keep forming and we'll keep
Human
going through
tendency,
that.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We were briefly talking about your agency past before
Right.
this as well. I want to dig into a few different parts of it, just because we have that in common, I guess, with
Yeah.
different timelines. There's a quote I want to say, and you can tell me if this is right. This is from you, so you can fact check me. You can never believe what you'll read on the internet. It says, Ruchir says, I can offer Australian quality with 50% discount.
Yeah.
Does that sound like you?
That was back in the day. That was 2011, maybe? 10 or 11. Yeah. That sounds like me.
That sounds like you.
Yeah.
In what context who were you saying that
This
to?
was actually Sydney Morning Herald did a centerfold on the benefits of outsourcing. and the idea was that we're working with all these not-for-profits, giving them the opportunity to have full-time programmers without having to pay really large bills for it. So I think that was, I'm guessing that is where that quote is from.
That's where I found it.
Yeah,
But that's such a good you tagline.
Fair enough, yeah.
I'm gonna have fun talking.
At least offshoring had such a big price component to it. So that was the thing we sold.
No, dude. I think it's really good. I think it's like catchy as hell. I want to ask you, because I'm in the early stages of my own agency. What were some of the early mistakes that you made?
Yeah.
That hopefully I can avoid making unless I've already made them.
Yeah. I think early stage, the most expensive mistake I made was we invested heavily into products. And so we build a Wix-like tool before Wix. We built a tool that would help you make your mobile site in less than 2 minutes. This is before mobile websites were a thing. But what I learned through that experience was, because the income was coming from the agency side, a lot of my attention would go towards the agency side. And there were some opportunities to connect the dots, but I didn't. And I was in this, again, young, didn't understand enough, in this Silicon Valley mindset of, build something with volume, look for customers, and you'll figure out the pricing later. And although we had sign-ups, I didn't go deep enough on figuring out why they used it and figure out how to sort of bring that out to sell. So the biggest mistake I made was try to be a product business and a services business at the same time. And I think that conflict, I still see that, there is one board, I have this conversation every call. So I would have separated that, be a really good agency, that's a great business. Why try and do all this other fancy stuff? I think obviously because it's a people-heavy business, who you hire matters a lot. And I think enforcing customer centricity, you cannot do enough of it, because ultimately that's what builds loyalty, not necessarily how you won the pitch. The last thing is pipeline. Having a big pipeline makes a successful agency business. And I think the big pipeline, why? Because in our case, we found the natural average churn was about 18 months.
Okay.
So as long as the pipeline was bigger than the churn rate, we grew quite fast, actually. So that is something agency owners miss. And you have to put in the effort in your own pipeline, make it big, then you will grow if you want to grow, as opposed to trying to, hoping that something will come.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in a sales career for all my life. So when I got my first job after university, it was cold calling, 40 cold calls a day. And there couldn't be enough numbers to call.
Right.
Because that whole top of funnel thing, I was working for a financial services firm, but they'd figured this out, right? It's an age-old thing.
Right.
Keep dialing. Keep dialing. The more you'll have, even if your conversion rate stays the same, the more you have in the pipeline, the better for you.
Right.
And that's just the story. So we'd do these numbers where we'd have a month-to-month assumption that this is how much churn would happen. And no one would freak out, right? Churn is churn. People are going to go away, whether they find somebody else, whether they die, they sell the business, whatever happens, something outside
People
your control.
change. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
You can provide the best that you can. And, this Alina
needs to
takes
get
this to
done.
heart a lot,
Yeah,
right? Because
exactly.
she works really hard for every client. And some unforeseen season, the client's like, yo, we got to stop. And we're like, I put so much effort into this.
Yeah.
We're like, no. So when we do our plans too, like the first time, so we've been running this for 3 years now. What you're talking about only came to mind like maybe about 9 to 12 months ago for us. When I was like, hey man, I used to do this like 10 years ago in my career. Why am I not doing it in my own business?
Right.
Now I'm becoming lazy. And I did the math, and you're absolutely right. Like having that section where you say like, okay, these are the new number of prospects. This is your closing rate.
Yeah.
This is new number of clients versus what you're leaving.
Yeah.
Over the long run, the two biggest levers are how many are you putting in the top.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, how many you close? Yeah.
And how many you close. Yeah.
And you have to build a cadence around it. I think that is the mistake.
Yeah.
I find most like agency folk making, that they don't spend enough time on sales. They focus so much on execution. And I think it's the wrong place to focus actually. Like you want capable enough people to execute for you.
Yes.
But you want to spend as much time on making sure the pipeline is warm, because then the business will grow if you want growth.
That's what I've noticed. And I try not to look at competition too much, but I do take inspiration from someone who's doing it right. And the other two things here. One is absolutely what you said about sales is the conversation I have. Like the job of an agency owner is not to be the chief marketer, is to be the chief salesperson for the thing, not the chief marketer for the clients.
Right.
However, most agencies are started by technicians.
Creative folks or programmers or whatever. Yeah.
I
was a programmer. Yeah.
It's the same thing with like Alina, right? She's a marketer at heart. She's in the trenches until today, as well.
Right.
And as I am separating myself out of the business and focusing more on the podcast, these are the discussions we're having. Like your job is not like if there is a macro off in an Excel sheet that we're using as a CRM for a client, don't go fixing that.
Right.
Because she's so attached to it, right? And that's a technician problem. And I've never been a marketing technician in that sense. Like I don't know fully how to build a campaign in Ads Manager. I know the basics and like I can see what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
But she is trying to pull out, and I asked her today before leaving. So I'm like, so what's on the agenda? She's like, oh, I sent one sales email. I got this other call booked in. I'm like,
yeah, you're focusing on the right thing.
This is your job now. Because like up until 2 months ago, that was still my job, doing that, getting the calls booked. I'm like, okay. And, I thought you would have the same mentality. And like, I was going to ask you, one of my questions, like, what's the main job of an agency owner? It's sales. And the other you mentioned, like people. And
I think sales and people, like ultimately, and I think that's true for most businesses. Like if you, I mean, what is sales is revenue. What is people is like making sure that you generate the profit you're supposed to. So if you're thinking about it, like profit and revenue, that's where the two levers are.
Yeah,
and
especially
I think you
for
spend
a
as much time.
service business,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
I too want to talk about people.
Yeah.
But I before that, I want to ask, what is some of the worst advice that you received when you're running an agency? Because I receive tons of advice from people. It's not like EO's experience share. When people say, what you should do.
Yeah.
You're like, you
tune out. Yeah.
But would you remember?
I have interesting, like some of it I can't even repeat.
So bad.
And like it's inappropriate, but like people, anyway. But like,
tell me
of
off
course,
camera.
I think, exactly. Like some of it was racist. Some of it was because especially like some of the markets you enter, people actually start thinking of it in racial terms. And see, we were in Sydney, Melbourne, Hong Kong, Singapore, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Dubai. And we had like effectively client servicing folks in most places. Some places we had technicians, but most of them were in Bangalore. Yeah. So everybody had a perception of who you are. And then there was like all this stuff that followed around it. But some of them, I received, like I had a board of advisors and I received some really positive advice, and my sales transaction was enabled by them and all of that. So I would say the other end of this is actually getting a board is really helpful. And like spending time first choosing the right board and then spending time with them on the details of what makes sense, what doesn't, makes a big difference too. So I'll give you a very simple insight. Like one of my board members told me, as a percentage of your gross margin, the cost of your people. And he gave me a range. And he was so right about that range because that naturally landed at a certain EBITDA. And that was effectively the agency world, if you are honest to yourself, is accountants extracting value out of creativity. Because if you look at the agency world, six companies rule the whole game. And the way they keep growing is by the arbitrage gap between what their listing multiple is and what they pay the agency. And very often they will actually pay the agency out of their own cash. We can go into the details, but that's the summary. So they are very, very good at establishing numbers in a budget.
Yeah.
So if you I would recommend if you're starting out on this is to have one board member who is like the head of a local large agency, because they will know exactly from a budgetary perspective what is a natural gross margin, what is a natural people cost, etc. And that will suddenly make sure that you're profitable.
And this board member, should they also be an investor just to have more skin in the game, like you were saying earlier?
In my case, I gave advisory shares.
Yeah.
So again, sub 1%, like usually valued with a strike price and so on. So you can structure it, but you could pay them, or you could ask them to invest. I think like at an early stage, asking somebody like that to invest is a lot because they don't know, like you don't know each other, and then like you're sort of putting them in an awkward spot, and you want that advice anyway.
There was one gentleman that came to me without telling the name. We didn't have any plans of selling the agency, never even thought about it. As I said, like it was a lifestyle business, so we're not really looking for, we didn't have like aggressive growth targets in that sense. And the gentleman came to me and made an offer. And I didn't understand it at all, so I didn't even know how to respond. I'm like, I am so illiterate when it comes to these things, right? Like, he's asking me, so I mean, in my mind, because I'm like, reading Silicon Valley news, I'm like, oh, I'll get a 5x multiple on my annual earnings. And we're very quickly
5x on annual earnings is a reasonable expectation.
Is it?
Yeah, profits. Yeah, for sure.
Because he was doing like 2x. On EBITDA.
On EBITDA, that's extremely low, and good you turn it down.
I basically acted like I didn't know what to say, which was partially true. But I was like, this is like...
I mean, you look, without going into the theory of it, effectively a buyer, very simplistically, either wants your EBITDA to pay for the purchase price or wants your growth to pay for the purchase price.
Over how many years?
They have a parameter they have to decide. But it's one of these two things.
Yeah.
So whatever price they give you, one of these two things is defining that price. So effectively, this person assumed, if you think about it, that they will recover what they pay you in 2 years.
Yeah.
And whether you grow or not. Yeah. That's effectively. And that's basically saying you won't grow and my break even is very short. Now, I'm just taking an extreme example, but when someone owns a machinery plant, like where they're making plastic or making machines, often their break even just in investing their plant is 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah. So, why get away with 2 years, for example? Yeah. And there it's often a stable output. Yeah. So I think at least one of the challenges is, at least in Middle East, multiples, because I know some other deals where I've guided them on. The multiples are not always attractive, but in the agency world, you can assume 5 to 10 times EBITDA depending on where you are, what do you serve, your growth rates, and so on. That's sort of reasonable.
It also depends on the buyer and their current business too, right?
And the buyer is often, say, trading at anywhere between 12 to 18 times EBITDA, maybe sometimes 22 times EBITDA. So by buying you at 8 times, they're already making an arbitrage 10, there. And on top of that, if you are sitting on cash, or most agencies will be an earnout. Your profits they will use to pay you. And they will cloak it really well, but that's effectively what's happening.
So how does that work then? Like, again, I'm sorry for my ignorance, but when a person sells an agency, do you stay on with the agency? How much of the payout do you get? I mean, it's probably all individual deals, but how do you get paid? Over what time do you stay on? In what capacity? How much time do you spend?
I'll talk in general terms because
Yeah.
I don't know what my NDA terms are, to be honest. So
Sure.
just basically look in all of this. In service businesses generally, because the leaders have the relationship, often the leaders are asked to stay on
With
for
the
anywhere.
clients, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. They have the client relationship, so they are asked to stay on anywhere between 12 months to as long as 60 months,
Okay.
5 years. Often the buyer, especially if it's one of these big six, they will try and buy a majority, anywhere between 50 to 75%, and then try and pay you the balance out in the next 1 to 5 years. Depends on which region, what is like, how badly do they want you, is it a strategic fit? So all of that defines the parameters. And then they have what I noticed, because I went through a proper sales process and we spoke to multiple people, all of them had some form of a matrix and some sort of a template to buy. So then you are like, what is the right fit? Some people wanted to do cash and shares. Some people wanted to do 60% upfront. Some people wanted to do 51 with a certain. Some people wanted to do just a transfer now, but no idea what happens in the future, and so on. So different people have different terms, and ultimately you have to decide what makes sense for you. But most service businesses, there will be some form of an earn-out.
Yeah. That's something we didn't realize. Because I'm so naive, I'm like, oh, we'll sell the business and we're done. We'll go for vacations. Like, no, you'll still be.
They want you to be around. Yeah.
How else do you assess the buyer quality? I mean, it's as you're describing it, there seems to be like these few that are just growing through eating others, and like that's a bad way to say it, but like it's a business model.
It's a business model.
If they have like these terms and prepared, and like, as you said, the model's already there, that means that's their main business is growth through acquisition.
That's right.
Versus growth through like innovation or product or service. Like
that's
that,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
So how do you assess like the buyer? The buyer.
I mean, look, people are at different stages in their life. For me, it was very important that I got flexibility on doing other things. So I basically did not really serve an earn-out. I was consulting them for 10 hours a month.
A month. Okay.
Yeah. And I was getting paid a small amount of money for that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So for me, that flexibility was very important.
Yeah.
Langur had a leadership team that wanted to continue. They were happy to continue. And they had certain benefits of doing that. So we had that. I think it comes down to where you are in life. Like, you might want to actually grow the organization or make something bigger because this organization gives you that platform.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want. But the one thing I will always say to people now, especially when I think of M&A, take as much upfront as possible. Always. Like, leave the earn-out to stuff you might not get. Yeah. Because in our case, like, the whole thing was quite complicated, and we actually bought it back and then I sold it again.
Yeah.
So I had this reverse M&A. It's very rare for my buyer to do, but they sold it back to us and then I sold it again onwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take as much upfront as possible.
So you had secondary sale then.
I had a secondary sale, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep that in mind. Take Alina, if you're listening, we're taking the whole amount, 90% upfront. I don't have much experience with this. I'll keep learning, and I might bug you other times so
anytime,
I can understand this. My only experience was when I joined a job, and it's something you talked about earlier. I got sweat equity. I was being poached from one organization to the other, and I got a certain amount, but it was vesting over 5 years. Right. The business didn't last 5 years.
Right.
The business was gone in 3 years. I left it in 2 years and stuff like that. So that's the other thing that is kind of in my mind. I'm like, what if something was given to me earlier versus a 5-year
vesting schedule?
Yeah, which for a very risky business, which when you're young, you take your shot, right?
Just on the vesting, I will say this out loud. I think you have to assume you will get the whole thing, because no matter what, like, if you're in it, you are going to take the risk and go for it. Yeah. But if along the way this is not working, you leave. So I don't know if having more like because if I was to enter a vesting schedule, I would enter it assuming that I'm getting the full amount.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't enter it. It means I'm not committed already.
Yeah, I didn't even think that far. I didn't understand. I
what that
just
meant,
saw the contract. I'm like, okay, so at some point, but then over time, in 2 years, and I realized that whatever percentage in time zero is zero. Even if they gave me 90% of the business, at time zero, the value of the company is going to be zero in 5 years, and that's zero. And that's what happened to the company. They kind of blew up in one of the, actually, they blew up in COVID because they had a lot of financial hedging instruments in place that weren't very safe. But I mean, I got out in time. But, the question always used to be at that time, I worked in the finance industry for 7 years, wearing a suit and a tie to work. Soul was gone completely. And I used to come home to Alina and she used to look at me, she's like, this is not you. This is not you. So my decision, as you said, like it depends on where you are in your life, was not about the money. It was more about how do I get my soul back? How do I not be stuck in a tie, wear these, polish my shoes every day, show up at work, drink the coffee, make water cooler jokes, and then go home? It was more about getting freedom and like thinking creatively and stuff like that. So when you made the choice between like, do you want these shares to hold on for another 5 years, or do you want to give that up for the chance to live an interesting or a new life, and you make it that way? I think it'll be the same when we revisit a sale for the agency. It'll probably be, where are we in life? What do we want to do with it?
Right.
You talk about people. Let's dig into people. I'll skip the hiring part because that is also very personal. But I want to talk about retention. So what has your experience been in retaining people? And I ask this because we've been trying so many models, right? We've tried full-time local employees. We've tried part-time. We've tried contractors. We've tried remote team. We think we have a model kind of set up. Like sometimes we pay a media buyer, for example, per client. Sometimes we'll have a full-time media buyer. So we're trying to understand, like, firstly, how do you, when you figure out this is a good, talented employee, and we all know it in our gut when we work with someone, right? Like, you don't need to do a questionnaire or a science. Be like, this guy is good. You know the guy is good.
Correct.
How far do you go in retaining them? What do you do for them?
I think, how interesting. I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes when building up the agency business. And I think...
Any business in general, though.
Yeah, but it is different because, the parameter that really matters in the agency business is consistency of work. So retainers.
Yeah.
And in many ways to think about like how you structure like someone's payroll comes down to the consistency of business. And so the more you can build retainers, the more flexibility you have then to not do
model. It's like per client you get paid.
Yeah.
Client's gone, you don't get paid.
So you don't do contract by contract you're just like, hey, I'm getting this much money a month. I will give you this much.
Correct.
And life is a little bit simpler to manage. And as you grow, you might be able to grow them.
Exactly.
I think, at least in the agency business, but I also think this is true for most businesses. My experience has been younger employees, the grass is greener on the other side. Older employees know a lot more of what they want. So I used to, at least in Langur, my team is much smaller now in distributed energy, but in Langur, we used to think about unforced attrition, and we used to bucket under 32 and above 32 because they were very, very, very different numbers. And like obviously you want lower numbers in both, but our above 32 numbers were close to zero. It was almost like the only attrition was forced attrition. But in the under, that number was really high. And like the truth is, when people are like still young in their career, a few things are happening. They're hearing stories from others and getting easily influenced, so they think that there's something better out there. And second is they're building a income ladder. And like that jump enables more income. So you always jump because the existing business has built economics around you. And for them to give you that kind of a jump is really hard often. So not to take it personally.
Yeah.
And be very clear that, hey, here are certain skill sets that I cannot retain, so I just need a bench and be ready with a bench. And then there are certain skill sets where you really want them to stay, and there you like spend as much time it takes. There, like I have an example in my current business. Somebody had a problem with something that I can't get into, but I was on that problem in minutes, and I put some really good people on that problem to make sure that person didn't feel ignored. That their concern about something was taken extremely seriously because this person is a key person for me and I can't lose them. So I will invest very heavily in experienced senior people, leaders, In younger people, obviously you train them, you spend all the energy, but you're not emotional about them. You basically build a bench just in case.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it.
So you just hedge yourself a bit with that.
Because just the life stage makes it very different. And then the more mature, experienced folks, people who have seen the world,
Yeah.
usually, like if you're a good employer, they want to stay with you because like that's all they're looking for.
Yeah.
And the joy of doing something bigger than themselves, working with people they enjoy and doing good work, right? Like ultimately that's what they're after. And obviously getting paid the bare minimum that you need to for your life. So at least make sure that you cover whatever their basic needs are and you give them something bigger. I would it is not hard to retain senior people if you at least have the right motivations.
Yeah, I'm just looking back at my career too. Like, how did my bosses retain me? And some of the things that at least I liked about them was they had done my job before me, and they can do my job better than I can do my job. So at least I'm in the company of a craftsperson in that sense. Like, I love watching them work, even though they don't do my job anymore because I do their old
You're
job.
learning from them, yeah.
I'm learning from them and I'm being around them and I'm getting inspired by them. I just remember this mentor that I had too, and I would just take any pay cut just to stay with him. And I was young. Grass is greener on the other side, but for some reason, like even guys my age, and I'm 36 now. When I was in my 20s, people were jumping around. Like the millennials is the people who started this jumping around business, and then Gen Z is doing it a bit more.
Yeah.
And I somehow stayed with him for 5 years.
And there's again a lot of like business advice which is junk around this. It's like, oh, you don't retain them because you're not a good boss, etc. But the reality is like people get a lot more easily influenced, right? Like social media is a performance platform. So for a lot of people, they see somebody else's performance and they're like, oh, that looks attractive. I need to try that. So
their website looks cool. It's a cool culture. Let me go there.
No, like this friend who was like living this amazing life, but the reality is you go in there. So I think you can't, that is not your fight, at least in the fights you pick up.
Yeah.
But good, like senior leaders, you look for ways to retain them.
Yeah. It's true that even when I jumped that job after 5 years, I was just following a shiny thing. I should have stayed. Like if there's I don't like to live a life of regrets, but if there's this wouldn't have happened if I didn't do that.
Sure, exactly.
But like I know I jumped because I was super happy with him and working with my mentor and doing all the things that we were doing together. Sorry, Shamez. He knows who he is. Okay. I want to talk about, we did talk about this a bit more now, but I wonder if this certain part has changed. So you've talked about your self-awareness increasing. You've talked about living more for joy. You've talked about living in a flow and, seeing what kind of happens. And I wanted to ask you, is your patience now better? Because it seems like, and this is a very selfish question.
I'm still working on it, yeah.
It's a very selfish question because I'm trying to work on it too.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, based on the things that you've been telling me, I'm like, I think you might have some guidance.
I have a serious impatience problem. No. And I think it's mostly related to speed of things not moving as fast as I want them. And obviously you're building organizations, you're building capability, you have all these people. Yeah. You want everybody to be running at the same speed as you. And obviously that's not going to happen. So you then have to think about what is the long-term view. So for me, a bit of the work has been moving from this, I want to grow fast, to is this the right decision long-term? And that's a big shift I'm going through at the moment. But it's something I'm working on. I'm not a natural at it. Quite regularly, why aren't we here yet? Yeah. But again, lowering expectations, focusing on, does this make sense long term? I'm trying to do more of that.
But if there's not someone like that constantly pushing, because this is probably true in business. If I do it longer, I'll probably realize a bit more. But it's true that the moment you take your eyes off the ball, it can spiral down very quickly, right? Any business, no matter how great your systems are set up and everything, but there needs to be that constant sort of positive pressure. Let's call it positive pressure. Let's put a spin on it. Yeah. And that impatience can be Well, this is what I'm struggling with. I feel like the impatience is healthy
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Wh-
I think time compounds, and I think that is the most undervalued piece of advice. I think it's like doing something really well over a long period of time yields results really meaningfully. Like speed just gives you permission to create structures that are badly done, and so
I love that.
and so you end up like sometimes like hiring bad people, sometimes taking on jobs you shouldn't have taken, etc., in the name of speed, but you actually doing yourself a disservice. Um, if you heard this guy Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money, really smart writer, really smart writer. Like one of the things he talks about is why is Warren Buffett a great investor? He's a good mind. Like that's nothing to take away from him and Charlie Munger and so on. But they've been doing it since they were like really, really young, and they're now in their 90s. So if you just make 10 to 12% every year, this is where you land. Like if you could take a comparable example, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala in India, billionaire, $6 billion, but he just died at 58. If he had stayed on till 90, maybe he would have made like so.
Yeah,
So
well, Munger and Buffett didn't make most of their money till they were 60. Anyway.
exactly, and they're like in 90, like they're both in their 90s. So the point I'm making is, I think if you take a long-term view on anything, it really compounds, and I think that is true. So I think learning that, I am trying to learn that for myself. Like that, I think makes sense. That in my mind, that is antithetical to impatience.
It is like we're trying to fight this whole move fast, break things thing a bit. So Alina is also very impatient. This is where we both get into groupthink because we're both a little impatient with our speed.
Can I say something also in the early stages of agency? Something I didn't do, but I would like really recommend doing is take money out of the business.
In what sense?
Like instead of reinvesting in growth because you're impatient, which is what I did.
Now.
Yeah, and I was like the thing I wish, because it was it could have always been profitable and I could have funded growth. But then there are all these failed things that came out of it because we're busy spending money on that also.
We're very good with our spending.
Oh, good, yeah.
We don't spend
Perfect,
a lot on it. What we did was we put 20% of our profits back into the business account, and that was not to be touched, and it was to be used in case of emergency, which is like, if tomorrow we wake up, we don't want to do this, how much runway do we have?
Yeah, sure.
So the runway goals always have, like, in that business at least, have 12 months of like her and my monthly expenses covered for living.
Yeah.
And that's where that's the only financial goal was that. Have 12 months of runway in the business bank account.
Amazing.
That if all the clients stop their retainers tomorrow, I fire all my employees tomorrow, and I have to, pay liquidation cost for the shutting down the business, will we have 12 months or not? And we keep that like kind of untouched.
Right.
But yeah, on this thing of speed too, I don't know if you heard this quote, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And this is like when I was working with working on this concept with Alina, we were sitting down at a coffee table. And I was like, okay, look at this coffee table. If I were to try to make it really fast as an artisan, I'd be like chopping really fast. What would happen? It'd be a shitty table. And then we should have to redo it again. But I tried to do it really fast when it became really crap because I didn't pay attention and it's not the smooth curves and everything. But if I worked on it slowly, it'll look smooth. If I do smooth, I do it once, which means I've done it once. So we have that constant battle of like trying to go slow just to be smooth, and smooth is actually fast.
I think the other way to frame it is to think about like the long-term impact of whatever decision you're making. Because let's say you do end up doing it for 10 years. What does that mean? I think that's a better framing because like then the short-term things you're taking on that you don't believe in will not happen, I would hope.
Yeah.
And I've made those mistakes, and I wouldn't like building a business now. Like so many of those lessons, I'm just doing them differently, thankfully, and saving everybody time in terms of not burning money behind useless things.
So you're taking a much more calculated approach.
At least every time something comes forward, you're like, oh, does that make sense in the long run? Is that the right thing to do? And then doing that, as opposed to, I really need to fix this right now. Whether or not it's good for the long term.
Yeah. So you're saying, do you find yourself saying no more often than saying yes?
I say no to a lot of things. Yeah. And I'm a lot more focused now this time than trying like before in the last business. So yeah, we every month I have a solar plant in Switzerland. Sorry, no, we only do emerging markets. I have projects in Nigeria. Oh, the currency is really weak. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Will you do hydropower? No, I'm sorry, I can't do hydropower. Will you do green batteries? Like we have invented a new battery made out of a green element. I'm sorry, I don't understand that. I cannot do it. So there's a lot of like, we want to be really good right now, do like effectively $50 to $100 million in this particular segment before we can say, okay, now we have this engine running really well. Let's try and go do something else. So we do some, like I'm taking on one small experiment to do something in East Africa, but otherwise we're almost completely.
So a lot more discipline. You're not building the next Wix or the next
no more products. That's right. Exactly. No such thing anymore.
Yeah, we tried that too. We took a product route in our first year of business, but it was educational product.
Right.
So we're trying to
teach people how to do it. That makes sense.
Put a self-paced course online and like. You're absolutely right. Like having that discipline and the focus to do that one bloody thing.
Yeah, it's better than to just do that and not do this.
Yeah.
Because at least you will know very fast whether that works or not. The problem is when you try to do both, your attention always go to the stuff that gives you money. That is what I found at least.
And you're half-assing both.
Exactly.
Because you don't know how to give the right energy to the right thing and you give half energy to both things.
Right.
So the analogy for me is like if I'm playing football, we're playing 7-a-side. If I choose to be defender and attacker, I'm going to do neither well.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Either I pick being a midfielder or a defender or an attacker.
Correct.
Or at least defender and midfielder. So at least those are close by. I can't pick those two far away positions and expect to like do anything.
I know there's so much knowledge around like focus in business, but I think there is something to be said about like at least think about it whether it makes sense for you long term.
This saying no thing is very, very important, right?
Yeah.
Like having the discipline to say like, not now, maybe later. Even if you want to just say like, maybe later.
Yeah.
Because when you hang around with more business people, this is the other thing. Hey, we should do this.
There's an opportunity.
We should do that. Hey, we should do this. And stuff comes at you. And I think last year I made my default answer for everything new. Just the default answer is no.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to hurt me financially or anything like that, I'm probably going to kick myself in the ass for a few things I said no to.
Yeah.
But hey, okay, let's rewind the clock a bit more, and then we'll come to the present again. I remember watching an episode you did with Faizan Said on Digitals, and you were mentioning that right after university you had, and you told me now too, but you had enough projects and a job offer from clients. Yeah. So that was like your path into entrepreneurship. But I wanted to ask after that, because the first time you started, you kind of didn't think too hard. You just started, right?
Just started,
But what was the point, or what were the moments, and moments can be a few moments, where you're like, you know what? I am an entrepreneur. First you thought you were. Yeah. Now you're like, I know I am. When did that switch happen for you?
I like... obviously one builds a story, like all these stories in your mind. When you start building your business, you're thinking about this business in a certain way in terms of what it will become. You think about the valuations and you're in this mindset, you'll get X times, whatever.
Yeah.
I think as you go through the journey, you realize like the only thing really matters is, are you doing something that solves a meaningful problem for someone?
Yeah.
Because that's where the value is. The arbitrage is simply if they did it themselves versus you doing it, is there a time and money arbitrage? That's all it is. And you have to zoom in on that. Everything else does not make sense. Like it's not worth your time. Like so for me, realizing that, a lot of it happened in the second half of Langur, especially when going through the exit process. Because then I was reflecting on, okay, what just happened? Because I've just lived 10 years here. Right. And what am I about to do? How should I think about that? And it's not, I actually have a lot of respect for people who work through things. In fact, like sometimes young people come to me and I'll be like, hey, why don't you take up a job? Because you'll actually learn a lot. Like I, in many ways, like did this too early. I wish I'd done a job because I'd never done a job really. So I have a lot of regard for people who go through that path. I think, but I knew exiting Langur that I want to keep working on interesting problems. I am really good at bulldozing, and what that does is I validate product ideas very fast, and I come up like I can set up organizations without thinking. But I'm not very good at scaling. That I'm learning right now still.
So 0 to 1 is good. 1 to n.
1 to 100 is like a different problem. Exactly. So 1 to n I'm learning basically, and I think that's where my like entrepreneurship skill set is that 0 to 1, and so I think I would be useless in many places because I wouldn't have the patience, as we're discussing per se, to like go through the big organization, do consensus building and so on. I think I'm like, oh, you need to prove that? Here is how we prove that, and we will prove that.
That is a very corporate job, managerial kind of role, that 1 to n. And when I joined Alina, this was literally our story was this. Alina is a bulldozer. 0 to 1, she gets there immediately. I'm the guy who never has original ideas. I will not get anything off it. I'll write in my journal all these ideas, but I won't take that first action. I'm just not that guy, and I have to learn to accept that too. She is more of the 0 to 1 person, but 1 to n, leave it to me. Because of my experience being a manager before and building someone else's businesses before. And she's always like going back to like, what if we start this? I'm like, can I just please keep building this one right now? I think this podcast is the only thing that went proper 0 to 1 for me.
Amazing.
But also with her push.
Sure.
Massive push from her. We're like, you need to do this.
Yeah, the benefits that can come out of it.
Huh?
Yeah, the benefits that can come out of it. Exactly.
She just told me to do what you said, which is like, don't think.
Just do.
So her idea was, which I did, was I went to Rove Hotel's website, booked their podcast studio for 4 hours.
Amazing.
Paid for it upfront, non-refundable.
Great.
That was her idea.
Now you had
to. Now it's 2 weeks away. Who did I get? I got Vuk, that you met outside.
Fair enough. Amazing.
My first guest, and I got my other boss to come as the second guest. And
Great.
started a podcast.
Well played, yeah.
So I have a lot to learn from her. I have a lot to learn from you as well on that 0 to 1
thing.
So
the journey I think a lot about now is can I learn how to scale? And that I think is a lot about capacity building in the organization. So I'm now on that path of trying to learn. So tell me, what should I think about?
Oh man, do you have 6 hours? I'll do a whole training session for you. No, I think that'll be round 2 because when we meet again, I think you will have some lessons. But we've just been notified that we do have 10 more minutes left to kill this episode. There's so much to talk to you about, man. I don't know why we only chose 2 hours, but for the sake of the audience, we will do a rapid fire round
to
close things off. But before that, I just want to. There's things that I want to talk to you about in here about your business crew, especially how you structure that, and like I want to dig into more of the 100 people you call kind of thing, and especially with EO and how that has worked out for you. And you've been with them for quite a while, and you've done some interesting things with them as well. So we'll get to talk about that at some point as well. I also want to talk about culture. You seem like a guy who's built a multi-global team in the agency world that I'm building. But alas, that will be another time. Let's do a rapid fire.
Sounds good.
The first one's the most difficult one. You ready? You can't think. You just have to answer.
All right.
Ice cream or gelato?
Gelato, but neither.
Neither works. Okay. Boring consistency with results assured. Or exciting flexibility with volatile results.
Consistency.
Yeah.
If
I asked you 5 years ago.
I'd probably say the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you had $50,000 that I gave you today to invest right now, where would you put it? And by the way, this is not investment advice.
Some form of annuities. I'm putting money in solar.
Fixed income?
But I like annuities, mainly because I have no idea where the markets will be. So do stuff that gives you monthly income.
Okay. If you weren't living in Dubai, India, or Australia, where would you be living?
I like the idea of Mauritius or Singapore.
Okay.
But more like, I love the idea of Mauritius.
Okay. Didn't expect that. Favorite TV show of all time, but not released this year?
The Wire.
I've
That's
So much
incredible.
about The
Yeah,
Wire.
you have to watch it.
This is how I get my recommendations. I started this podcast just to get TV recommendations.
It's incredible.
You mentioned The Go Giver. Is there any other book every business owner should read?
I'm really into articles more than books. I don't have
Tell me an
quick
article.
ideas.
Or an author
Who
writes?
This guy is really good. Stratchery, Ben Thompson, I think. Yeah, he's quite good. But actually my almost always homepage is news.ycombinator.com because I'm also a programmer. So often I enjoy the technical problems shared there.
Nice.
But I love the quality of content that goes to the first page.
Is that the same as Hacker News? Or
Exactly,
different
News, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. What's the first way you made money, and what was the most recent sale that you made?
First way 15, I think I sold a banner for, I want to say $70. That was, I built a graphic design banner. Yeah, that was a long time ago, 2001. And then what was the most recent sale?
The most recent sale.
We've just closed 3 deals this month, all solar plants, all in India.
For $70?
Different scale now, yeah. The plant value, what is the plant value of these things? Close to $1 million, these 3 things, yeah.
Look at the difference, eh?
Yeah, life changes, exactly, yeah.
If you were to stop being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm forcing you, let's say I am God and I force you, you cannot be an entrepreneur anymore. What would you be doing?
I think politician.
Really?
Yeah, I really care about impact, and I think that's where I would go.
Huh, now that the SPG thing makes sense.
Yeah, that
now.
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of my things I've done are around either impact or the bulldozer. They're the 2 commonalities.
You do them together now too.
Yeah, I do, yeah, exactly. The joy.
Okay, to close off, my final question. If you had and I'm borrowing this from Tim Ferriss, I just steal all his questions, just a big fanboy. If you had a billboard on Sheikh Zayed Road, the giantest one, millions of people drive by it every day,
Yeah.
what message would you put on there? And you can narrow down the message to, let's say, all the drivers are entrepreneurs. What would you want to say to them?
That requires thinking. The one that's coming to mind is hire fast, fire fast. That just came to mind, as you asked that question. I think the one I like is, and that's more general in life, people's reaction to you. People's reaction to you is a reflection of their relationship with themselves. That's really, and that has served me in really good stead. They're the 2 that came to mind immediately because rapid fire.
That was I like the second one because I was on the receiving end of that last night when I was telling the story. When my insecurity came out and the way I was reacting, it's totally true. If I were to give you one, if I had your mouth, I would say go with the flow too.
Yeah.
That seems to be the theme of your life.
It's
right
something
now.
I'm learning right now. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, accept more.
That's great, man. See, here's a list of things we can talk about. You also you wanted to talk about governance and boards, buying businesses we didn't talk about, entering new markets we didn't talk about, fundraising we didn't talk about, financial freedom we didn't talk about too much, thinking big we didn't talk about. You'll have to come back.
Sounds good.
But this has been fun.
Thank you.
I've taken tons of notes, and I think I'll be rewatching this and taking more notes. And I hope this is not the last time we have a chat.
Yeah, thank you. You're very kind and generous. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being open, and I'll see you.
Super grateful. Thanks so much.
Cheers, buddy.
Nice to be here.